Hey everyone, and welcome to the All It Takes is a Gold podcast, the best place in the entire world, including all of Canada, to learn how to build new thoughts, new actions, and new results. I'm your host, John Acuff, and today I'm joined by Patrick Lencioni. Who's that? I'm so glad you asked. Pat is one of the founders of the Table Group and is the pioneer of the organizational health movement. He is the author of 12 books, which have sold over 7 million copies. Which that is a ridiculous amount of copies. Like millions, 7 million, that's a ton of books. That's awesome. And he's been translated into more than 30 languages. As the president of the Table Group, Pat spends his time speaking and writing about leadership, teamwork, and organizational health, and consulting with executives and their teams. And we've done events together before, but we've always passed each other like in the hall for 4 seconds, or I met him 10 years ago for like 30 seconds. So it was fun to have a real conversation about the work he's doing. And he's got a new book that I absolutely loved. It was super fun to talk about. I took this assessment that came with the book, and it really identified some parts of my life, some parts of my work that were eye-opening. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. But first, a quick message about the sponsor of today's episode. Every year, I set crazy big goals, and every year, there's one productivity tool that I use to help me reach them. The Finish Calendar. I've been using it for over a decade, and it's helped me crush goals like running 1,000 miles in a year, growing my business, and writing a New York Times best-selling book. Thousands of people have bought them over the years too. Why? Because it works. It's not magic, it's science. Study after study has shown how important tracking your year is. But my favorite came from the University of Konstanz in Germany. They showed that when you track when and where you're going to work on something, you double your chances of success. Let me say that again. You double your chances of success. This calendar is massive. It's beautiful, it's motivational, and it comes in paper or dry erase. On top of all the other amazing features, you can choose to display it vertically or horizontally because this bad boy is also double-sided. If you've got a big goal or a lot of big goals, grab a Finish Calendar today at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com. All right, let's jump right into my interview with Patrick Lencioni. Pat, I'm so excited about this today. We've crossed paths a couple of times, different green rooms, different events, but this is the first time that we've been able to hang out for a while. So thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's hard to get to know somebody in a green room.
It is. There's a lot of jockeying. There's a lot of like, that person is important. How do I talk to him? And I always feel a little uncomfortable in a green room. I think we're going to have a fun conversation. Speaking of green rooms, I recently spoke at Global Leadership Summit and it was really fun. And somebody there, a couple people actually said, John, you were funny, but it's hard to ever top Pat at Global Leadership Summit because he had an experience that involved the Cleveland Browns that was one of the funniest things that's ever happened in the history of Global Leadership Summit. Can you share that story?
Yeah. And I felt bad for the guy. I really did. I mean, it was slightly embarrassing for me, but I really felt bad for him. So here's what happened. So I was telling a story about my book, The Ideal Team Player. So I was talking about the importance of a great team player is humble, hungry, and smart. And I said, and I just used this example about the Cleveland Browns. I said they were looking for a quarterback, and they had the choices. They had Terry Bridgewater, who was this great college quarterback who was super humble and really hardworking and really good with his players. He was beloved. He's been hurt since he's been in the NFL, but he's a pretty good quarterback. And then they had Johnny Manziel, who was neither humble, hungry, nor smart. Mm-hmm. And so I said, and see, here's the Cleveland Browns trying to turn their franchise around, and they picked the guy whose fingers were a little longer. So they were looking for all the measurables. And if only they had picked this guy, they could have built their franchise around this guy, blah, 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 blah. And that wasn't my whole talk. That was just one of the examples. And then Bill, the pastor, stood up and said, Pat, I want to introduce you to somebody in front of 9,000 people in the place. Oh, and he goes, Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, stand up, Jimmy.
Oh,
and so
man.
Initially, I was embarrassed, but I was really sad for him.
And didn't you do a video the next year? Like, didn't they do some sort of a video with you where you said, hey, like, You did a joke about it. They talked about that moment and loved that moment as a highlight of the whole conference.
Yes. Every year, I've been there. I spoke at that conference 7 times, which is so funny. And they'd always bring in the humor from the last year. Once I referred to Bill as a bastard. I was just joking around. I was like, you bastard, like, because he did something funny. And then the next time they had my mom on telling me to watch my language.
That's great. That's great. Just know they love you. That idea of telling a story, an example where the person's in the audience is really funny to me. It's happened a couple times to me before, and I was so encouraged to hear it happen to somebody else.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you a couple of warm-up questions to kind of get us started, kind of some random questions, because I find sometimes I'll jump right into the book and it goes super fast, super quick. So can I ask a couple warm-up questions?
We could talk about whatever you want.
Okay. Number 1, who do you think is weirder, bird owners or snake owners?
Snake owners.
Snake owners? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, snakes, there's no love. Now, they're similar to birds. There's no affection, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure there's snake people out there going, you don't understand. My boa constrictor loves me. But I'm a lot more afraid of snakes than I am of birds.
Okay. Well, I actually put that on Twitter. 400 people voted. 80% said snake owners. So you're in.
Okay.
But one person did say I should have had C, which was ferret owners. And I think that could have beat even bird owner, because they're a little weird. Second question, what's the best gift someone has ever given you? And don't say your kids. Like, don't say like, oh, my wife gave me the kids. What's the best gift someone's ever given you?
The best gift. I'm trying to think, and I have gotten some. Dave Ramsey is a great gift giver.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And so he has given me a baseball bat, like a Louisville Slugger bat with my name and a little quote on it. Oh,
nice.
You know something? Daniel Harkavy. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an author and a dear friend. He gave me a sword that hangs in my office, a massive real sword with a Bible verse on it for my 40th birthday. And
that's awesome.
We pull it out in the office and swing it around and stuff. And that was, what a gift, a massive, real heavy sword with a Bible verse on it. So I
love that. That's a great answer. Okay. Third and last random question. What's the most old man thing you do? Like, I pick up acorns. Like, if I see an acorn, I pick it up and put it in my pocket. And if it rains, I say, we really needed that rain. So, like, what's something old manish that you do?
I think everyone in my family would say, no matter what the weather is outside, I tell my kids, this is the kind of weather where you're going to get the worst sunburn. When it's overcast, that's when you get the worst. You're near the water, that's going to be the worst. It's in June, the sun is highest. Hey, it's April. It's really early, so it's kind of cool and you don't realize it. Yeah. And every time they go out at night and they're like, is this the worst moonlight for sunburn?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That is an old man thing. I love all those. I love all those. I could ask you a million questions like that, but you wrote a really great book. It's called The 6 Types of Working Genius. I've read the whole thing. And on page 106, I wrote down what I thought my 2 were going to be. Like, you had gone through them and I was like, I'm predicting. And then I did your assessment. The assessment is super fun, super fast. Like, you guys were so strategic. It takes about 10 minutes. Sometimes when somebody goes, it's a quick assessment, it takes 9 hours. I don't have 9 hours. Like, that's not genius to me. And I was right. That's what I loved. I guessed, and that's how well the book was written.
Beautiful.
It lined up with my guess. So I was so excited about that. But walk us through what you would say are the 6 types of working genius.
Okay. So, and these aren't just 6 random things. These are the 6 skills or gifts or activities that are required to get anything done. So take any project, launching a company, introducing a new program at a company, starting a church, planning a family vacation. You have to do all 6 of these things. And I'm going to describe them in order from the highest level at 50,000 feet all the way down to landing the plane.
Perfect.
And so you need them all. Unfortunately, each of us only has 2 that we love, that we're great at. And 2 of them we hate, and we're not very good at it. They drive us crazy. And so if we don't know what those are, it's really tough to love your work and do your best. So here they are. The first one at 50,000 feet is the gift of wonder. This is a genius that people have. God gives some people the genius of wonder. My wife has it. My son has it. I do not. These are people that notice things and they speculate about things and they ask questions. And they're constantly pondering, like, is this the best it could be? Is there something else better? Why is it done this way? And they ask questions. And that's where every great new thing starts. Somebody saying, I wonder if this is the best we can do. Or I wonder if it really should be this way. Now, most people that have this as a genius don't know it's a genius because throughout their lives, people have said, why are you still asking questions? Can you just get on board? And they're like,
they get criticized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So many people we've talked to said, oh my gosh, all my life, people have been saying, stop doing that. And yet it's so necessary. This whole book, this whole model came about because one of my colleagues and friends, Amy, said to me one day, why are you like that?
That's not a compliment.
Yeah,
Not,
exactly.
I don't know if you took it that way. It's not a compliment.
She wasn't harsh, but she was curious. Like, do you think you understand why you're like that? And I was like, nope. And I want to figure it out. She didn't know the answer, but she asked the question. So that's the first genius, the genius of wonder, pondering, scanning the world and wondering, like, is this the right way it should be?
Who would you say is somebody that might be famous that we would go, oh, like, is Steve Jobs, would he have had the gift of wonder?
You know, I don't know. I met him once. He offered me a job once and I turned it down. He interviewed me when he was at Pixar. So I have a little personal experience
wild.
there. And
that is wild.
He's definitely the next one, which is an inventor. I think wanderers are the philosophers more. Are the ones that are, and it's an internal process. So I don't know if Steve Jobs was responding to other people saying, hey, I need a better device, or hey, this looks ugly. And if he liked to solve that problem, or if he was the one that was noticing it.
Yeah.
Lots of people that are wonders, people don't even know who they are because they're just posing the question. Mother Teresa was probably a wanderer. I just was watching a movie about her the other day, and she was just walking around in Calcutta, looking at people and just going, I don't think it's supposed to be this way. And she didn't know what she was going to do. She just had faith and followed her nose. But she, I think she was just like, I can't believe this is the way it's supposed to be. So I think
it's got to be different than this.
My son will tell you that wanderers are very deep, and sometimes they're prone to a certain level of anxiety and depression just from noticing things so much. They take things in and they're like, whoa. Whereas other people can walk right by something and not really notice it. They're noticers.
And the weight of that can be heavy.
It can be very heavy. Yeah. Yes. So that's the first genius.
That's wonder, 50,000 feet.
The next one, coming down to about 35,000 feet, is the genius of invention. Steve Jobs definitely had this. This is one of mine. This is one of yours.
Yeah.
And it's not, some people will say, well, inventors are geniuses. No, all of these are geniuses. You and I, God just gave us this natural desire to come up with new ideas all the time.
Yeah.
It's often, our wives will tell you, it's often not necessary or even welcomed. And yet we do it because that's how we're wired.
Yeah. And you riff. I find myself riffing on things people are trying to say, and I'll give them 7 other ways they could say it before they have the chance to say it. And people don't seem to enjoy that. when you finish their sentences, but also riff on the finish.
Oh.
Like they don't like that. But I've got all these ideas. I know the word you're looking for could be one of these 8. Let's go.
Exactly.
And they don't appreciate that.
And it's so funny because, and then we feel really bad because we're not doing it because we're rude. We're doing it because we're so excited we want to get it out.
Yeah. Let's go.
So inventors wake up in the morning and they get energized and they get joy from coming up with new ways to do things that would help people. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't even like a lot of context. Like, I don't want people to over contextualize. I want them just to tell me the problem and let me think like out of the box.
Which is why you're a good speaker. That's part of what we do. So you can go to a software company one week and a chimney sweep convention the next week and a DJ conference the next week. And somebody go, well, but you're not a chimney sweep. You go, no, exactly. Like, I don't need that context. I know people are people, and I can idea SWAT team this and provide some really good ideas that fit that audience. That's why we're a broad speaker, not a SME that only goes to, I talk to insurance adjusters.
Exactly. And there are subject matter experts that are brilliant, but they're not brilliant in the same way. They have knowledge and expertise, and they've studied something for years. Mm-hmm. And whereas ours is, and that's why we call it's a God-given talent. We don't deserve any credit for it. It was given to us, and we get to steward this resource. It's just natural. So when people go, that's amazing, I say, well, for me, it's actually easy. And what you do is amazing. I cannot imagine doing that. Yeah. So one man's trash is another man's treasure, 100%,
100%. So there's invention. What's the third one?
The third one is really critical. It's called discernment. And that's a word that gets used in the faith community a lot, like discerning your vocation in life and all those things. And that's part of it. But discernment is really all about instinct and intuition and gut feel and good judgment using like variable analysis and integrative thinking and pattern recognition. Some people just have really good gut feels about things. They can assess a situation, again, not through expertise, but they just have a really good sense. And I like to talk about a woman that I work with named Tracy, who's got so much discernment. My wife and I, whether we are planning a vacation or deciding whether to buy a new home or refinance our home or whether I should buy a sport coat for speeches, we will always go, we should ask Tracy.
So good.
And because she just has really good judgment, it's not magic, is she can kind of see a whole picture and arrive at the answer. And I asked her one day, I said, were you like this as a kid? She goes, yeah, my friends would always come and ask me for advice.
Yeah. Because
she just is really good at looking at the whole picture and netting out what is probably the right answer.
And that's my wife. My wife, and I'm going to have her go through the assessment too, and my team, because I found it so helpful. But Jenny, my favorite example recently was a friend called and said, hey, I'd love to ask Jenny this question. We've got our kid who's 5. It's our 4th kid, our last kid, and we could send them to kindergarten or keep them back a year. And Jenny said, well, if you keep them back a year, she'll never be in high school with her older sister. So she was looking at, okay,
yes,
10 years from now, she won't get to be a freshman with her sister who's a senior. They'll never get to share high school, and she'd probably miss that experience. And she's the youngest kid, so she's already really vocal and really, and like I never would have gone, well, how will this impact freshman year of high school? But right. Jenny's discernment, like she can't turn that off. And so now, and she has a background in construction management. So if somebody wants to do a remodeling project, they come to Jenny and she tells them sometimes the things they don't want to hear, but hey, here's the things, like you got to do this. And then occasionally people will ignore that advice and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
100% of the time she goes, I saw that coming, and the way you pitched that eave and the roof was not going to, I saw water was going to pool there. And so discernment, that was one when I read the book. I think that's fun about the book. You can start to see people you live with, you work with. It's super clear.
And trust their discernment. And so like Tracy is my book editor who works here. So I come up with new ideas. I write my books for her because she reads them every night that I write something. And the next day she'll come back and go, I loved this character. Didn't love this one. This one doesn't work at all. This is great. Yeah. I wrote an article yesterday and she came into the room after I finished it and she said, this is fantastic. And that gives me confidence that it's good because her gut is just right on.
Yeah. My wife reads all my first drafts, and the question she asks that is kind of our running joke in our family is she'll come in and say, do you want feedback or compliments?
Exactly.
And I'll like, if it's early in the project, I just need some compliments to push through. If it's late in the project, I need feedback that actually shapes it and hones it and helps it. So I love that you've got somebody discerning that you're able to work with as an editor. That's such a valuable thing. So that's the third. What's the fourth?
The fourth is called galvanizing. So let's say somebody wonders, they have a question, an inventor comes up with something, the discerner gives them feedback and they tweak it and they're like, wow, this is a great idea. The galvanizer is the person who loves, they get joy and energy from rallying the troops and getting people going and reminding them and exciting people and pushing them a little and inspiring them. Okay. So you do this naturally. You love doing this. I love this. This is one of your geniuses.
This. Yeah. That I identified that almost instantly. And people will say to me, okay, well, how do you have 17,000 people in a private Facebook group that you're just encouraging? And I'm like, but why wouldn't I?
Right.
Like and they'll go, but how did you gather them all? And I'm like, cause that's what you do.
Exactly.
And I love doing, like my wife gets frustrated where if I get into a long conversation with the valet about like, dude, you can do that. You can write a book. Like he just wants to give me the keys, but I'm like, tell me, what are you working on, dude? Like what's next? Let's go. And I'm galvanizing him because I'm excited for him. Like he has a dream. Like he's trying to build something. Like, let's go.
And
so
that
I saw that
is a gift.
Yeah.
That is a gift.
But that's one of your working competencies, but it's not your other one. What's
it
your
does
other
not
one?
give me joy and energy. The problem was for 23 years in my own company, I was doing it every day. And I wasn't doing the invention and the discernment that I love. So I'd come to work excited. That's how this whole model came about, is I would come to work at a company with friends that I loved. And I loved the subject matter of what we did. And I'd be excited. And by 11 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be kind of grumpy.
Yeah.
And finally, one of my friends said, why are you like that? And I said, I don't know, but I'm tired of it. And we realized it was because nobody else in the company liked to galvanize. So every day I would be there and they'd go, you're going to have to push us. You're going to have to remind us. You're going to have to get us excited again. I like doing it once. I'm pretty good at it. I can do it twice, but I'm not. It really is difficult for me to stay on top of that. You know what the thing is? I found a guy in my company who loves to galvanize. His job didn't involve that. And I said, you're the chief galvanizing officer. And he was like, you're kidding. You mean I can do that? And we're like, yeah, you have a gift at it. So his job satisfaction went through the roof. Mine did too, because I wasn't constantly having to do that. I have to do it some. We get twice as much done in less time because we're all working in our genius. And I was allowed to stop feeling guilty about the fact that I didn't like to galvanize.
Yeah, it's a real gift. And it reminded me of like Scottie Pippen being the assistant manager of their college basketball team. And then eventually they played him. And they were like, oh my gosh, he's Scottie Pippen. Like there's a lot of people that can organize the team. Like, but they said, okay, hey, why don't you start playing more? And then all of a sudden, wait a second, this is Scottie Pippen. I felt like that happened in the book where you find talents of people on the team, you identify their working genius that they're not using, but they go, yeah, actually, I love doing this at home. I didn't know there was a spot for it at the office. And you go, oh, you're leaving the best parts of yourself in the parking lot. Like, what if you could bring them into the building 40 hours a week? That turns a lot of jobs into dream jobs. That's the power of the book to me, is you don't have to go find a dream job. You might already have one. You're just not using those things yet.
Exactly. And we're meant to use those, and people feel guilty like, well, I guess I need to find a hobby. And it's like, God gave you that gift so you could steward it and use it. And most managers, what I'm shocked at is how managers find out what people's genius is. And they're like, I want to change your job.
Yeah.
We've had so many people call us and say, I was going to fire somebody. And then I did their working genius and realized they're a great cultural fit. I just had them in the wrong position.
Yeah. And then when you get them into that position, it's like, wow, you're a bird, not a fish.
Yeah.
You make a terrible bird, but you're amazing in the ocean.
Right.
And if we put you in the ocean, wow, like you're crushing.
Right.
And so I just kept seeing that again and again and again. So the fifth one, what's the fifth? And we're getting down on the vertical.
Yeah. So we start at wonder, we go to invention, we go to discernment, galvanizing. Now we're getting ready to land the plane. But the next genius is called enablement. And that's it's a great word. Now people go, yeah, but what about drugs and alcohol enabling people? It gets used in the addiction community. Enabling people to do something important and good is one of the greatest gifts a person can have. It's a real genius, and not everybody has it. Too many people that have this as a genius think, well, I'm just nice, or I'm just easily manipulated, or I'm malleable. It's like, no. This is a gift and a genius that if a team doesn't have it, things don't get done. These are the glue on a team. And some people wake up in the morning and say, I hope someone needs me and asks me to help them, because I will find a way to help them on their terms, and that will give me joy and energy. Now, as a follower of Jesus, I got to tell you something, John. I don't have this, and I used to feel so guilty about it.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought, why?
I don't have any of it either.
Right. And yet you love to help that guy, the guy that's parking your car.
Yeah.
But you want to help him by using your geniuses. My wife will say, Pat, I need you to help me clean the garage this weekend. So the first thing I do is I'm like, well, tell me, let's come up with a new system for cleaning the garage. And let's evaluate why you want to clean it, what you're really trying to get. And she's like, I don't want your invention. I don't want your discernment. Just help me. That's enablement.
Yeah.
She said, just stand in the corner, and when I hand you something, put it where I ask you to. Now, she has friends who are like, please let me help you with that. I would love that. Yeah. And I'm like, it's killing me.
No, people don't like, you know, the phrase like would give the shirt off their back. Like, and like people never ask for my shirt because they know that's not a gift. Like, and I'm not like, I'll show up and do stuff, but I can think of people in my neighborhood that you're like, if I had a flat tire, if a coyote got my dog, if there was a leak in my roof, I'd call Rob. And Rob is gonna like, he has the gift of enablement.
Right.
And I think most people know, don't call John. Call him for certain things. Don't call him for that.
Right. Because if somebody says, can I have the shirt off your back? What we're going to say is, tell me what you really want, because maybe I can come up with something better. I bet it's not a shirt that you need. You need a coat. And they're like, just give me your damn shirt.
Yeah. And so that is so, on a team, what would that role look like? Tell me an enabler on an average Monday, what are they doing?
Well, it could be a lot of different things, but it's a role. I hesitate to use the word support. It could be customer support, but there's CEOs that have this, because what they look at their job is like, when people in the organization need me to do something to keep us on track, I want them to come to me and ask me, and I will help them with that. Right? There are pastors that don't have this, that like to write a homily or a sermon and come up with a new idea, and they sit by themselves and they go for walks. And there are other pastors who love when people come and say, can you counsel me? Can you help me? My family's really struggling. They're like, yes, I'm coming alive. I want to help you.
Yeah.
But
and that's where the guilt comes in too.
Yes.
Like that, because what'll happen, whether it's a CEO or pastor, people will go, well, they don't care about people. And they go, well, I mean, they're leading a board meeting in a really, like, they're creating ideas there, because there's a ton of freedom in this book. Like, that's the thing in the book. I'm going to just read you a section that I loved, and it's towards the end. And you say, we've felt bad about ourselves for not being good at some kind of work, and most of us have beaten ourselves up for it. I did it in my own life early in my career. Why can't I just do this as well as my colleagues? What's wrong with me? The answer to that question should have been, because they're doing what they enjoy and are naturally adept at doing, and I'm not. But because I didn't understand that, I felt guilty and attributed my struggles to lack of effort or intelligence, or worse yet, virtue. Ooh. And I feel like there's a lot of freedom. Could you sense that as you're working on this model, that you were seeing people experience freedom from things that they thought I should be this way, I should do this thing?
Yes, it is so liberating to say, you mean to say that let me give you an example. My dad used to get me up every Saturday morning to help him mow the lawn. Mm-hmm. I hated it. Yeah. I didn't know why. I felt guilty, like I'm a bad son. But I would do it, but I didn't enjoy it, and I dreaded it. And when I came up with this model, I realized my dad wanted me to do the two things that I really, really don't like to do. He wanted me to do enablement and tenacity, which we'll get to. And that is, he said he wanted me to do whatever he asked him and to finish it perfectly. Now, knowing this now, I realize if he had said, hey, see that yard, Pat? Why don't you come up with a plan for how you want it to look and figure out a way to get that done? Yeah. I'd have been like, this is so fun. My first job out of college, John, I had been really successful, and I got one of the most coveted jobs in America. They must have had a bad interview process, because they hired me, and 2 years later I left and said I did not succeed. And I thought, I'm lazy, I'm not as smart as these other people, and I must not have cared enough about my career. Well, literally 2 years ago, I discovered why I failed in that job, because I was supposed to do the very things I hated doing. Had I known that, I wouldn't have taken that job. Had I known that, I wouldn't have made myself, it took me years to get over the guilt and the self-accusation that there was something wrong with me.
I can totally see that. For me, the Sunday Scaries thing you talked about, I was a job jumper. I was I wrote a book called Quitter because I quit so many times. And I would have a moment where it was good, and then I would I would get bored and eventually jump until I realized, okay, these are the things I love to do. Like right now, people are like, how have you written X amount of books? Well, I love to write books. Like, I love to write. And I had a boss at a job email me she hit me up on LinkedIn and said, seeing what you're doing now, no wonder you were so frustrated.
Right.
And that was a really and she was like, I'm so proud of you. Like, it was really encouraging, but I understood what she said, because I was so grumpy. I was so frustrated. I didn't fit in, and I felt like, wow, I'm just the biggest jerk. I'll go find another job. And I changed. I think I had like 7 full-time jobs in like 9 years. And so this book, I feel like, is a lot of people are gonna go, oh, okay. There's a lot of eureka in here.
My wife, she's a WI, which is called the creative dreamer. My wife, and I fell in love with her because she had all these great ideas, principled woman. We're getting ready to go to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary, and we're going to drive for 13 hours to go to an island, and then we're going to drive 13 hours back. And people are like, why aren't you flying? It's like, because the most fun part is when we're in the car, because we're coming up with ideas, and that's one of the things we love. Well, as a mom, if there's moms listening to this, she felt guilty when she needed to be like, well, what about all these moms that love the laundry, they're always got the dinner on the table. They do all this stuff. That was a struggle for my wife. And she thought, well, I love my children. Why am I not loving doing these things? And it's like, because that's T activities. That's tenacity stuff. And that's not what she loves.
It's a finish line.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean we have a pass on that. We still have to do things we don't love. But if we feel guilty about it, by the way, John, because of Working Genius, after 29 and a half years of feeling guilty, my wife is finally outsourcing some things because she said, God made me to be a wanderer and an inventor, and the tenacity stuff. She actually hired 2 weeks ago an accountability coach.
For the first time.
And for years, I would say, Laura, let's outsource this. She goes, no. She felt guilty. But what does that say about me? I should just do it. What's wrong with me? And I'd be like, nothing. But until we had the language around it, she took the assessment and said, okay, I can actually accept the fact that God did not give me these gifts. It's okay. Getting rid of that kind of guilt and self-judgment and judgment of others is probably the most powerful thing about this model.
Well, and it's a crazy productivity hack too, because imagine the amount of time, creativity, and energy you donate to guilt, or you donate to shame, because for me, my version of that is, for years, what would happen with running my own company, I'd go to some mastermind event or something, and then like I'd hear these other people who loved like, leading things. And I love the idea portion. And then I come home, I tell my wife, I just got to be a better leader. Got to figure out this leadership thing. I hate it so much, but I better figure it out. And she'd go, oh, who'd you talk to today? Because she could tell, she would go, who'd you have coffee with? Because I feel like you had coffee with somebody who loves having 1,000 staff. I don't want 1,000 staff. I love our small team.
Me too.
But I'd go to these events and they'd go, you're not scaling enough. You should have 100 people. And I'd go, oh, I don't want to do 100 one-on-ones. Like, I don't want to. And that's not how I'm wired. But it felt like the only progression was individual contributor, and then you have to lead. And I'd go, and I saw people at jobs get punished as a reward. So they'd be great graphic designers, and their reward was to become a creative director and no longer do graphic design.
Right.
And then they'd micromanage because they missed doing graphic design.
Right.
So then and so this book, to me, I was like, oh my God.
So you could really relate to the characters in the book.
100%. Yeah. So often. That was what was so fun for me. And so we kind of hinted on it. The last one's tenacity, getting things across the finish line. Explain what that one is.
So while enablers love to help people and respond to the needs to get things off the ground, there are other people in this world who I cannot relate to at all, but thank God they exist, who love to finish things. They wake up in the morning and say, do I have a list of things that I have to wrestle to the ground, blow through obstacles, meet the standards, do it on time, and I can actually celebrate that it's done. And I like to finish. I'm the opposite. So when I write a book, John, I don't know if you're like this too, it's like I get halfway through it and I start to lose interest. And Tracy, my editor, says, no, I'm going to lock you in that room until you come out with a good ending, because we're not going to make a good book that has a bad ending. And every time she makes me do that. Well, there are certain people in the world who love the finished part. And they love, like, I really enjoy the last 10%. And that is a gift. And they have the genius of tenacity. And this is why, God made us because we need each other. None of us are an island. And when we have this thing called a team map, that if like 6 people on a team do the assessment, they look at their map and it shows them where they have a preponderance of geniuses and a lack of them. Or it'll show where they have a preponderance of people that really hate the same thing. And they'll look at it and they'll go, That's why we stink at that. That's why we never succeed at this. Oh my gosh. Or we need to restructure our jobs because I want you to be in your genius. I'd like to be in my genius. And suddenly productivity and morale goes through the roof in a very tangible way. So
yeah, it really simplifies such a complicated thing.
Yeah.
And in a really nice way. And again, that's why I related to the book so well, is that I could see myself, I could see people I work with, I could see jobs I'd had that didn't work. I could see relationships that were challenging and go, oh, okay, that's why it's hard. Or this is why, I love doing this part of my job and I tolerate this other part. And like, here's my guilt. So I've had people say I have a friend who, when he goes to a city to speak at an event, he loves to post out on Instagram, hey, I'm coming to Cleveland. Let's meet at a coffee shop, and have like 30 strangers show up. I'm more introverted than that. Like, I like ideas. Like,
right.
I'd rather be in the hotel room creating great ideas that'll help 1,000 people when I put them in a book or a speech. So like, the idea of going to a coffee shop and just tweeting the internet and saying, come meet here, like, that's really tiring to me and doesn't give me joy. A free hour where I get to go jam out and read a bunch of ideas and collect ideas and put them together, that renews me. And so, but I used to feel guilty about that, going, well, if I was a better leader, I would just be around people more, and that would. And so,
yeah, I thought, Cody, a guy I work with, says the best leaders are the self-aware ones because they surround themselves by people that love what they don't. And yeah, I am not
such a good say.
I'm not a galvanizer. Great. I mean, I can do it, but I don't love it. And I thought, man, isn't that what a CEO is supposed to do? Well, most people think of CEOs, they should be good at everything. Well, they should wonder well, and they need to invent. Of course, they have to invent. And then they need to have good discernment. Well, they need to galvanize people. They need to be helpful, and then they need to finish things. Well, nobody is good at all of those. No one. So the best leaders are the ones that know themselves and then celebrate the heck out of other people that are better than they are at things. And they put people around them so that everybody's working in their genius. So this really it's an individual personality tool around work, but it's also a productivity tool. It really is a productivity hack.
Now, how would this apply to families? Because I feel like there's a family application.
Oh, it's massive. So let me tell you how it applied in ours. So for years, I mentioned this before, I would get frustrated at my wife because I would come home from work where I got to spend a lot of time in my genius, but I didn't know that. And then things wouldn't be as good as we had hoped because she, like me, doesn't have tenacity. And I would be like, Laura, what's going on? We just need to get this done. And then I would say, let's hire somebody to do it. And she would take that as an insult. And so when we figured this out, we realized neither of us have tenacity. And we need to outsource some things, and we need to give each other grace. And so when I come home and something didn't get done according to spec, and by the way, there is no spec in my family, I would just be like, I know it's hard. It's hard. And she didn't feel guilty about that. So that's huge. The other thing is we looked at our kids, and my youngest son, I'm like you, we have one left at home. He is 16 and he's a WE. He's a wanderer and an enabler. That means he's a deep thinker that loves to help others. He doesn't initiate things. That's part of the profile. He waits to have other people do things and he responds. We know that. And so my wife and I can go, well, let's remember he's a WE. This doesn't come naturally to him. Because what do we usually do with our kids? If you have two kids, one's creative and one's organized, we go to the organized one and say, hey, you need to be more creative. We go to the creative one and go, you need to be more organized. How horrible.
Yeah.
We do that because we think we're helping them. Now we can actually meet our kids where they are and the stuff they love to do. My expectations about my son that's at home right now is taking less AP classes than any of my kids ever did, and we don't care. Mm-hmm. He is not built to love structure, studying, grinding through things.
Yep. That's not how he's wired.
And why in the world are we going to make him feel bad for that? Do we still have to get him to do his homework? Yes. Do we still have to coach him up to a certain level? But now that we know what he loves to do, we can actually have much more grace and approach motivating him in a different way. I can't believe I'm 57 years old and I learned this when I was 55 and I didn't get to use it, but I'm going back to my other kids and understanding what they're about. I'm helping them think about what they might want to do in their careers in a different way.
Well, and I think everybody listening to this that has a kid if you have more than one kid, they came to the planet with different brains.
Yes.
They just do. They have different personalities. They have different strengths. And so just reading it made me go, okay, where have I pushed on one of my kids in the wrong way, or encouraged the wrong thing, or tried them to do something that wasn't part of their genius or didn't give them joy? And what's funny is that often when that happens, whether it's an individual or in a team, I think you just try to push harder. Like it's kind of like an American in Italy who just talks louder as if it's a volume issue. It's not. It's a language issue. It's not a volume issue.
Right.
And so you just push and push and push and push, and you never stop to go, wait a second, maybe this isn't who this person is.
Right. And to have that on paper allows you to celebrate what they are rather than trying to, and people will say, well, shouldn't I get better at the things I'm bad at? And the answer is no. Learn how to tolerate it when you have to, because we all have to. My son, Matt, who helped us develop this thing, he doesn't have tenacity. When we give him tenacity work at work, because he works here, he goes into a room, shuts the door and says, I'm going into the tea cave. I'm going to come out in 2 hours from now. I'll probably be dead, but I got to do this. So we all have to do that. Yeah. But if I gave him a job that made him stay in the tea cave for too long, that's terrible for him and it's terrible for everybody else.
That's where monsters are born. Monsters are born in long-term caves.
Oh, that's a great way to say it.
Yeah, that's how I think about it here in the cave. So I love the book. I think it's going to help a ton of people. There's freedom in it. I'm curious about your process a little bit. How long does it take you roughly to write a book?
Well, so usually this one is different because we came up with the assessment almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, 250,000 people have taken it.
Yes.
So that's what's really fun is that the reason it's so lean and spot on is that it's been built from 250,000 people.
Right.
This isn't an idea you had and then you launched.
Right. It. And the book hasn't come out yet. When people listen to this, it will have just come out. Yep. So we're within like a week of that, or
Totally.
But the book is going to come out after. But we were shocked at how many people were responding to this. And so that's the process here was a little different. Normally though, John, and I love talking to authors, I would say it's like having a baby. It's about a 9-month process for me.
Yep.
Now I'm not a full-time writer. Jim Collins, I've gotten to know Jim. He'll go off in the mountains with his cat and sit there and just crank for hours and days. I have to do it in short bursts because I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people. I like variety. And so I like to write for 2 days and then go do something else and then come back and write for 2 days and do something else. So I would say soup to nuts. If you put it all together, it's about a 9-month process. And if I had the right kind of personality where I could, or the other personality that I could do it all at one time, it's probably about a 3-month of full-time work.
Boiled down 3 months.
Yeah. But again, I don't know that. I couldn't do that. I don't know. What do you do?
I do. It takes me 500 to 600 hours to write a book. And I know that because I track the hours, 500 to 600 hours. I tracked them for this last book. And I left myself notes because what happens is the first 100 hours I go, I got it. And then I don't got it. I'm like, This is it. And then it's not it. Oh. So now I have a gingerbread trail back out. And so I can see, okay, by 200 hours, I should have roughly 40 pages. So if you only have 40 pages, you're good. So now
that's great.
I've mapped it. And so I made it a process, and that took so much of the pressure off of it being magic. And so now I did 3 hours yesterday, and I'll do an hour today. And then so it's little bites, but because one of my broken soundtracks I'd say is you should finish the book today. And but I shouldn't.
Right.
So I wrote on a piece of paper, 3 pages is plenty. 3 pages is plenty. And I remind myself. So I've really kind of boiled it down, the process for me. Did you know you always wanted to write fables? How did that happen?
I love this question. I used to watch a show called The Waltons when I was a kid. It was an old TV show. And when I was a little kid, I was probably 7 years old. That would be the last show I'd get to watch before I went to bed. And the main character was named John Boy Walton. It took place in I think West Virginia, at the early part of the 20th century. And he was a writer. And he would write in his journal every night. And I thought, that's really cool. And that was my first understanding of writing. Then I go to college. I study economics and Spanish, and because I want to get something productive, but I take screenwriting class my senior year, and I fall in love with screenwriting. So I wrote a number of screenplays some Hollywood looked at a few of them and I got to know some people, but I didn't want to live that world. But I love dialogue. I love character development. So here I am years later, I come up with a leadership theory, and some people I'm working with said, this is a book. You should write a book. And I said, well, I'm not going to write a book. I'm busy. And they said, no, somebody else is going to write this book. And I said, maybe I'll write a book. So I sat down to write a leadership book, and I realized that I had a whole bunch of books on my shelf that were really long that I never finished. And I thought, why don't I just write a story? And my books are like screenplays. There are a lot of dialogue and not a lot of excess narration. And so I did that. And so I finished the first one. I said, I'm going to take it to Kinko's, and I'm just going to make copies and give it to my clients. And a publisher accidentally saw it and decided they wanted to publish it, which we thought was cool. And then people liked the stories. So now that's kind of the way I do things. This new book, though, has got a really good story, I think, but it's got a huge back section about how to apply this stuff on teams in your life and your family. So I think this one is a twofer book.
Yeah, there's no now what? Because sometimes a fable book, you'll go, well, what do I do with that?
Right.
Like on a Tuesday, what do I do with that? The application answers so many of the now what questions. The assessment does too. Yeah, I would say it is 2-in-1. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team came out 20 years ago.
Yep.
20 years ago. And it's number 604 on Amazon today of all books being sold, which is wild. Was that a rocket ride from the start or a slow burn that's continued to go?
No, it was a slow burn because most of my books, when they first come out, I think we're not a great marketing firm. I only have, we have a small company like yours. I didn't want to be bigger. People back in the go-go days were like, you should go public, you should grow, you should. And we were like, nah, we like working together too much. We really want to do this part well. Let's partner with others.
Yeah.
So when that book came out, we didn't market it very well. And then it was really word of mouth.
Okay, wow.
Speaking at the Leadership Summit was a big boost. The USA Today and Wall Street Journal did some articles, but really most of my books are like, we have a loyal readership and they share it with other people. Okay. And so this book is going to go a little faster, we think, because the assessment's been out. But we kind of rely on people really liking it, getting good things out of it, and wanting to share it with people on their team.
Yeah, because then it does have sticking power. When somebody says, hey, this changed this part of my life, I think it would change another part of your life. Because you can market to a certain degree, but if the concept isn't there, you're just telling more people about something that's not good.
Yes.
And so that, that I always so many people overspend on marketing when they start versus making overspending on editing. And I'm always like, no, like pay the editor first. Like you can market for the rest of the life of the book, but if you release a bad book, it's hard to go back.
Absolutely. And now, so it's got to be a great book. And here's something you are fantastic at. You need to explain it. The title of the book and the packaging itself isn't valuable unless it's connected to what the book is really about. And there's some wonderful books out there that are poorly packaged and poorly titled, and it's harder for people to discover them. And then there's other books that have the world's greatest title and cover, and then you pick it up and you're like, oh.
Yeah, for me, one of my favorite books I wrote was called Do Over, and it was the wrong title. It was it was personal to me, so I overfought for it. And people read it as, hey, so you failed and you ruined your life. How about another chance? And no one wants to identify with needing a do-over.
Isn't
so
that
I
funny?
was like, this, and it was like, I got the best reviews on it. We marketed it like crazy. The publisher did an amazing job on it, but it was just the wrong title. And and so I learned $1 million lesson on titling.
I wrote a book called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job, which I was sure was a great title.
Yeah.
And nobody could take it to work.
Yeah. You don't want that on your desk. Yeah.
And so
exactly.
we actually went back and repackaged it. And it's now called The Truth About Employee Engagement, because that's what it really was about. Here's the 3 things that make anybody's job miserable. Yeah. But we had to bite the bullet and repackage it. And luckily, only one person wrote to us and said, hey, I bought 2 of these. This practically looks like the same book. And we said, it is the same book. So we sent him a free one. But the point is, sometimes the packaging doesn't match it, or there's a problem. So
yeah. So only a couple last questions. 3 last questions. What are some goals you're working on right now in your own life?
Okay. One of my goals is to make this material, to shepherd this material properly. Because we think, and this goes back to my childhood, there are people in the world who have living difficult lives because they're not doing what God intended them to do. And we want as many of those people to take this as possible, which is why we priced it low. Like Dave, you and I are both friends with Dave Ramsey. I love Dave. And he was like, Pat, you should have charged a heck of a lot more for this book because it's worth a lot. And we said, no, $25. We want everyone to say, I want my junior in college to take this. I want my husband who's retiring to do this. I want every person on my team to do it, because we really want people to stop working in areas that make them miserable. So that's the goal, is to get the very, very, very most out of this book that we can. And it's not about monetizing it. It's about impact. Other goals in my life right now is to, I'm learning to pray better, and to really live in a quiet way in my faith with Christ, because I get distracted really easily. And that's a goal of mine, is peace.
It's a great goal.
Is really, truly peace. It starts every morning when I wake up, and it's the pursuit I have during the day. Other goals?
Like fitness goal, hobby goal, like you launching a kid to college goal, like what else?
Yeah, I mean, the goal that's always there is to be the best husband and dad I can be.
Yeah.
But that can be a little dangerous too, because if I evaluate that in the near term, sometimes I have to do things that are hard for the long term. And so that's probably my biggest challenge. But that's always my number one thing, is to be the best husband and dad I can be.
Perfect. Okay, second to last question. What's on your Mount Rushmore of nonfiction books that you'd recommend people read? Other than books you've written, what are some that you'd go, oh, this is one that I'd put on my Mount Rushmore. This is one, or this is one I've given away a lot. That's not my own book. Right.
Okay. I was going to skip over faith books, but there's a whole bunch of. So there's a book called Drunks and Monks, which is crazy good, brilliant book, written by this lawyer. Very hilarious, very dark, very moving. Drunks and Monks. I bought 100 of those and just give it to most of the guys I meet. I'll have to send it to you. And I actually met the guy who wrote it, and he self-published it. And I think it's one of the most brilliant pieces of nonfiction I've ever read.
Did you tell him you bought 100 copies?
Oh, yeah.
Was he surprised by that?
Oh, yeah. You know how I found out about him? I was going to be on this radio show, and he was on the day before. So I listened to it, and I said, who is this guy they're talking about? And I went online, and I read as much of it as I could on Amazon, and then I just bought it, and then it blew my mind and changed my life. And so I just bought a bunch of those.
That's a strong endorsement.
Yeah. Business books I wrote, I love Built to Last still, which was Jim Collins and Jerry Porras' first one. I really liked that a lot. Nonfiction. I'm embarrassed to say that one of my favorite books, I can never remember the title. It's so poorly titled and so poorly covered. And it's about finding peace in life. It's the establishment and maintaining of peace. And it's this little pink book written by this French priest, and it was translated from French into English. And it is powerful and small, and I've given a lot of those out. And then a friend of mine named Chris Stefanik wrote a book about moral relativism, which was really impactful for me. And it's called Absolute Relativism. And those would be on my Mount Rushmore.
That's a great. None of those have been mentioned. I ask that every time, and none of those have been mentioned.
I mean, the Bible. I'm not going to say the Bible because obviously.
Yeah. Well, that's like if you could only have dinner with one person, you got to say Jesus. So you have to say Jesus off the table for this particular dinner. Last question. This is an easy one. Where can people find out more about the book, more about you? Where would you like people to go?
Well, if you want to learn about Working Genius and take the assessment, go to workinggenius.com. And we have all kinds of stuff on there. Working Genius, 2 G's in the middle.com. The book you can get any place where books are sold. It's available right now. And then my company is called The Table Group, and tablegroup.com is where you can find out more about everything we do. But workinggenius.com is a great place to start.
And I've taken the assessment and loved it. I've got it printed out right here. This is my assessment. It was fantastic.
I can't wait to find out what Jenny's is.
I know. I'm going to try to guess, but we'll see. Well, it's got to be Discernment. I think Discernment and Tenacity, because she if she has a task and she doesn't finish it, it's painful.
Oh.
If I have a task and I have to finish it, it's painful. But we'll see. I'll let her take the assessment and get a final assessment. But Pat, this has been a blast. I knew it was going to be fun. I can't wait to spend more time when I'm on your side of the country or vice versa. So thanks for doing this with me today.
Thanks for having me, John. God bless you, buddy.
Thank you for listening to my interview with Patrick Lencioni today. We'll put all the links in the show notes as always. And thank you for reviewing my podcast. The reviews you write are super encouraging. In fact, I saw one the other day that I wanted to share with you. Someone said, and this was the headline, "Time well spent." They said, "This is the one podcast I never delete without listening to first. Acuff is upbeat, encouraging, and lovably goofy." And I'll take that. You know what? Lovably goofy? I'll wear that mantle. Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, because we have these episodes on YouTube, like I'm in front of a wall of Lego sets. That's pretty goofy. So I'm going to accept that. They said he's lovably goofy as he strives to make his listeners not just better leaders, but better people. His guests are interesting and inspiring and relevant. I write down at least one, I must remember this nugget of perfection from every podcast. That's so encouraging. Lovably goofy, nugget of I must remember this. I loved it. So thank you for writing reviews. Keep them coming. Please make sure you subscribe or follow or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. And please write a review. I'll see you next week. And remember, all it takes is a goal. And don't forget to pick up your copy of the Finish Calendar. Brand new, massive, beautiful, double-sided, vertically or horizontally, paper or dry erase at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes and exclusive content from John Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.